So this talk's called Turn Up the Good. It's part of two presentations that I'm doing as part of an advanced workshop that I give. And I'm still working on this. This is a work in progress. And let's see where it goes. I first want to honor Kent Beck. Kent Beck wrote some books. You probably all know of him. Hopefully you do, if you're interested in Agile stuff at all. I heard him mentioned in the last talk, I think, as well. I value him quite highly, along with Ward Cunningham, for a lot of the things that they've thought and done and that I've learned about. So the basic idea of Turn Up the Good, although I learned about that long before I knew who Kent Beck was, but it came to me when I was reading his first version of that Extreme Programming Explained book. They call it the White Book. Because somewhere, I think it's in the kind of the foreword or something, he says he pictured all these processes that they had as being something that had potential. He knew they worked because he had experience with them. I really value that he said it that way. He'd experienced how good they were, and he wondered what would it be like if I just simply turned those up. I make a hand symbol like this. Turn them up, like you're turning up the radio knob on a radio or turning up the volume on your guitar. This is how I thought, I think of what he would say. He's saying, if it was just like an amplifier, what if I turned it up? And so that's where I get this from. So let me see if I can share this. Pardon me for using this seat. At times I'm going to do that. I've been traveling for the last month and a half, and I'm doing 4 or 5 workshops every week, and I'm trying to conserve my energy because I have 3 more weeks to go. You don't want to be responsible for me dying on stage, so we're going to use this set, right? So I'm going to talk about the return to Øredev. And I don't know how to say that. I still, after all these years, so I'm just going to use that. Sort of a short history. It's going to come at the beginning here of this talk. I always give this as in every talk that I give. I'm not here to tell you what to do or how to do it or whether or not you should do it. I'm just sharing stuff that I've done, and I'm sharing stuff that I believe and my observations, and I hope it's useful to you. But I in no way believe that I could know how to help you or how to make your life different or better, but I hope I can inspire you somehow to make the improvements you want to be making in your workplace or in your lives. So I'm going to share about mob programming, very quick, short introduction. We started this or originated it at Hunter Industries in San Diego or near San Diego, California, in San Marcos in October, I believe it was October of 2011. The reason I'm sharing you this is because this is sort of the culmination of 20 years almost of me practicing the things I'm going to share with you today and why I think they work for me. Mob programming is all the brilliant minds working together on the same thing at the same time in the same space. And the only difference between that maybe and regular old Agile, because I think the folks that sort of introduced Agile understood that we will do better if we can collaborate, and we can't collaborate if we're working on different things. We can't collaborate if we're working on them at different times or in different phases. And we can't work on them or collaborate if we're not working in the same, essentially in the same area, although it could be done remotely as well. But with mob programming, we just add this idea that we're going to work at the same computer. And that really puts a fine point on it. Has anybody here done mob programming? You've actually done it? Oh, good, maybe over a quarter of you. How many of you have heard about mob programming? Before right now, of course. So that's more than half of you. That's good to hear, because I'm pretty sure when I came here in 2013, nobody except maybe 1 or 2 people may have even tried it, and maybe 10 had heard of it, because it was still in its infancy at the time. So we're going to gather together all the people that are needed to do the work, and we're all going to stick together while we're doing that work. And this gets rid of a lot of problems, and it's, I would say, the value of it has sort of been proven in some ways, but we're going to look at a few things about it, and then I'm going to tell you a little bit about why I think it's working, and then we'll go on to the turn up the good part of the talk. That's what it looks like from the front and the back. It seems crazy, but it's being used all over the world. So 10 years ago, it really didn't exist, and now it's being done all over the place. I'm going to show you a bunch of photos really quick. Alaska in the US, the UK, Boston, Stockholm, San Diego, Zito, Unruly in London. Here's a group doing it remotely. Here's a group using it to teach programming and agile software development at Harvard. London again. Here's a group in South Africa. I always like to point out everywhere north of the equator, they face in this direction. Everywhere south of the equator, they face in the opposite direction. You see, North America again, facing that way. Here again, North America in the 60s. I think this photo was taken when I was about 7 years old. And it's amazing to me, but I think that they are doing something like what mob programming is. All the brilliant minds working together at a single computer at the same time in the same space. And nobody there is tweeting right now. Pretty weird. So another group here, that was in Greece, France, Florida. Oh, this is Göteborg, something like that. Japan, notice they're sitting on the floor. And also in Japan, they have desks. Pretty cool. It's not 5 people watching one person programming. It's very different. It's a bunch of people together programming. I won't go into details of how this is done, but to keep it from being chaos, we have to have some sort of a method, and we use a thing we call driver navigators, where the person at the keyboard is keying in the things that the navigator's guiding them to key in. And we use this basic concept that I got from Llewellyn Falco back in somewhere around 2007 to 2009. I learned to pair program this way. For an idea to go from someone's head into the computer, it must go through someone else's hands. It's a very straightforward and simple thing. However, it's not easy to do. But let's go on. I want to talk about the turn up the good part of this, how it started for us. And this is part of the good, turn up the good aspects of this. I had been asked to join this company to act as a manager for a team of developers that weren't doing real well. They had some big nasty problems. They had some projects that were failing. And I agreed to work for them as long as we could have a few of my requirements met. One of them was there would be no interference. If you're hiring me to come in and help you, why are you doing that? Because you haven't been able to get it to work yourselves. So am I going to do this as per your instruction, or are you hiring me to come in and do this for you? It's kind of what Jason was talking about in the last talk. In a way, you're my customer, and I'm here to serve you, to give you the end result you want, not to do things the way you want me to do things. Another thing was, I can postpone or cancel any work. If the team's not ready for it, we're not ready for it. Another thing is, I won't do any estimates. Whether you think estimates are good or not, they're not. So, and also, I don't think we had quite used this terminology back then, but we're not going to do things as projects. We're going to work on things, but we're not going to do them as a project where you gather a team together, you do the work, and then you deliver it, and then the team splits up. The team's going to take on any work that the company, that they're capable of doing for the company, and that's how we're going to work. So this is sort of the start of it. Let's not do the things that don't work. If we continue to do the things that don't work over and over, expecting us to get better or to have different results, I call this the cycle of continuous no improvements. And I'm not going to do that. I've got a long enough career already of doing that I don't want to do it anymore. So there you go. That's how we're going to start. So I wanted to turn up the good on some stuff. One of the things was our ability to recognize code smells and our ability to know what to do about that. You know, these are important things to me. We're going to figure out how to work well together. I've worked in software development 35 years or so. The first 15 years, I always worked as a solo developer. Most of us work as solo developers. And we get really good at working alone, and we never get good at working with other people. Let's learn how to do that. I also believe that the team doing the work can figure out how to do that work. In other words, they can manage themselves. I hope that makes sense to you. In other words, let them manage themselves. Everybody here knows how to get to work on time most days, go to the doctor when you're sick, get some food when you're hungry, drive a car, whatever it is you do in your lives, and then you get to work and they tell you what you're going to do, who you're going to work with, where you're going to sit, what kind of equipment you get to have. You have to go ask for permission sometimes to go work with someone else in the company that you need information from. You have to get permission to buy a new piece of equipment that you need to buy. that you need for your work? Okay, we're going to practice together, turn up the good on helping each other that way. We picked a specific way to do it, doing coding dojos. I won't get into this right now. We also needed to get good at getting good results from our retrospectives. So we decided to do them every day. Once a day at the end of the day, we did a retrospective. And we asked ourselves, what went well today, and how do we turn that up tomorrow? This is the idea of turn up the good. This is the theme of this talk today. And I believe that those are the things that are important, more important than mob programming itself. Although mob programming, I think, is a highly effective way to work. I think that the underlying approach that I took is more important than what we ended up doing. We didn't know we would end up at mob programming, but I knew we would end up at something good if we followed these little ideas that I was sharing with you here. So this means we have to be open to chance. One day, that chance came. One of the people on the team, after we'd been doing basically the study sessions for about 6 months and learning to work well together and learning how to see bad code, one of the developers had worked on a project that they felt needed to be reactivated. It was due in just a few months, although at that time I was thinking this code should just be trash binned or thrown away and maybe cancel the project altogether. So I said, what do you want to do about it? And they said, well, we're going to take a look at it. So the person who was working on it before went off to take a look at it and took one of the other developers with them. I kind of like this picture. Does anybody know that story? You know what story that's from? You ever heard of Hansel and Gretel? It's a story of two innocent kids who become vicious murderers just because their dad left them out in a forest. And then they kill an old woman, clearly an innocent old woman who was just giving them something sweet to eat, and they murder her. So it's a vicious story. But I was thinking they were kind of like lost out in the forest, but they came back to me in about an hour and they said, hey, this is really lousy code. I said, what do you want to do about that? And they said, let's get the whole team together. We'll take a look at it and figure out what to do. They're becoming self-managing. We gathered together, and instead of just looking at it, they started working on it together. And in about 2 hours, somebody came into the room and said, you have to leave the room. We have this room scheduled for a meeting. You know how it is at your company. You get the room for an hour or two. So instead of going back to our work areas, somebody on the team immediately said, with a real sense of urgency, said, let's go find another room. Let's go find another room. And my mind really sparked up right then. We went and found another room, and as soon as we got there, someone said, well, why don't we just book rooms for the rest of the day? They were turning up the good in real time, not just at the end of the day. So look at what they had done. They learned how to see the bad code, and they knew how to manage themselves and figure out what to do about it, and they decided they wanted more of the good of working together. At the end of the day, we did our retrospective, and we found these 4 things. We were getting a lot done, a lot more than usual. We were learning a lot, and the stuff we were doing was really high quality, and it was fun. Any one of those things is enough for me to say, I want more of this. But that we got all 4 of those. And so I asked the team, how do we turn up the good on this? And they said, let's do this again tomorrow. That was in 2011, about this time of year. I think it was October, and we haven't stopped since. Now, I've left the company. In 2015, I went off because I was getting so many requests to talk about this, mob programming. I went off to do this, but they continue to do it now. 3.5 years they've done it since I've left, and we did it 3.5 years while I was there, so they continue to do it. This is really about, one of the things about Turn Up the Good is we need to take action. This little combination of ideas that I just shared with you, when we did these things in a focused manner, we were able to get some good result out of it. And to me, it's really just this slide here. I could spend a whole hour on just this. The basic concept is, if we prepare ourselves, if we make an environment where great things can happen, great things will happen. If we don't do that, we'll just be cranking out the same lousy work, and everybody will be disappointed in their lives. And I don't want to work at a place like that. So there is no magic, but it's all magic. That's sort of one of those things they call a paradox, I think. it seems to me like there's no magic to this, and yet why aren't we all doing it? Why aren't we all finding a way to make things better in our workplace? And my dad would have said, and that's my dad when he was about 5 years old, he would say good things happen to those who pay attention. Because we miss the good things if we're not paying attention. Now, there is somebody here who's probably going to tell me when we're done, so you just have to keep me informed, all right? Because I put about 5 good hard stops in this talk. If we don't get to even the first one, then I'm really doing poorly. But I got a couple hours worth of material. So paying attention is part of turning up the good. Now, nobody knew about mob programming in 2011, 2012 until this fellow, Llewellyn Falco. If you never have heard him speak, I'd say the next chance you can, do that. He came to give us some training on some technical stuff we felt we needed some training on, and he noticed how we were working. Now, he and I had done some workshops and stuff earlier, and we had devised our own coding dojo style, and he noticed that we had our workstation set up in a coding dojo style where everybody would be together, working together. And he said, "Are you working this way?" And I said, "Yeah, all day long, every day." And that was interesting to him, and then we started hearing from other people. So Llewellyn Falco started spreading that news around and it really came to its head here in 2012 in August at the Agile Alliance Conference in Dallas. And 5 or 6 people, 7 or 8 people came up to me and asked about mob programming. What is this thing you guys are doing, you folks are doing? And after the first couple and others started gathering around to ask, I thought, well, I can't just spend the whole conference explaining this over and over and over. So I got one of those open jam spaces. At the conference, they have these rooms where you can just propose a talk and give it while you're at the conference. You know, the idea for the talk comes to you, you go do it. So I gave that talk, and at the same time, we realized that we should start sharing this, that people were interested in it, and maybe it was helpful to them. And so we began tweeting about it. That first tweet I've been able to find on mob programming came from Chris Lucian, who is now the manager. He took my spot when I left Hunter, where we kind of originated this idea. And he was, I think, the first person to tweet using that hashtag. So this is another important part of this. We went ahead and put a little blog so we could start writing some about it. We stopped after a few months. We wrote everything we could think about it. I probably should update it every now and then. And at the next conference I was invited to speak at, where we were going to do a talk on, that first one we weren't invited to talk about mob programming. And neither at this conference I'm showing you here, they wanted to hear about TDD and using a coding dojo style. And so we thought, well, what would be better than making a video of the way we work? And we turned it into that, you saw it at the beginning, a 3-minute time lapse of an entire day of us working. 8 hours of work condensed down to 3 minutes. And so we put that in YouTube, and now I think it's gone up to, it looks like 41,000 something views. So clearly this isn't going viral, but at least somebody's looking at it. And in my records that you can go on and look at your analytics, they're watching it for more than just a few seconds. So at least it's interesting enough to watch it deep into the thing. So this is about, this is a great saying, chance favors the prepared mind. We were prepared, we were beginning to be prepared to share this idea. So be prepared. That's another thing about turning up the good. And now Jacob comes into the picture. He saw, I think, I'd have to talk to him to find out, I think he saw us tweeting about it, and he invited me to come speak at this conference 5 years ago. And I appreciate that very much, and it's still one of the highlights of my life. The rest of my life has been rather drab. And this was a fantastic conference, and I really loved it. And this one, even this year, this is my 3rd time. I really love it. So he sent me the invitation, and he was interested in 2 topics, mob programming and no estimates. And so this is another thing that chance favors the connected mind. That's from Stephen Johnson, who wrote the book, Where Do Good Ideas Come From, or something like that. So this is another important part about turning up the good. It's about being prepared and then having all those connections. I think my dad would have said, opportunity's always knocking. It's not like opportunity knocks once. I talk a lot about my dad. I appreciate him a great deal. He passed away about 5 years ago, but he was a really wise person. I want to talk about randomness a little bit. So randomness and serendipity and stumbling in the right direction. So randomness this is kind of an interesting thing to me. There's this lack of pattern that comes with randomness, and I like to ask the question, it's like the draw of the cards, it's luck, but is this good or is this bad? It's just what it is. It's neither good nor bad. It's what we've got. So I found this book when I was studying along the way of getting to this talk, earlier version of what I'm talking about here. This work by this fellow named Leonard Mlodinow. I think I'm saying that about correctly. The Drunkard's Walk, How Randomness Rules Our Lives. And he gives a bunch of examples, and one of them is fund manager success. And this is like the top fund managers and how they do compared to each other. Not compared to how much money they made for people compared to all fund managers, but how they did compared to each other. Who would you rather invest with? The ones who, for the last 5 years, have done amazingly good, or the rest who didn't do so well? Well, this is the 5 years after that. It just doesn't matter. Just pick one out of the hat, because it's all just randomness. Somebody is expected to do well year after year after year just based on the flip of the coin, just based on randomness. We can't make decisions based on this thing. They say in the banks, past performance is not an indication of future results. We can't count on how somebody did before. I've done a lot of studying on this. I'm only showing you 2 of the things. Here's another study that was done that showed 92.7% of top performers fail to remain top performers after 2 years. So you have to keep picking a new one every 2 years, I guess. So randomness rules our lives. I think that was sort of the theme of his book. What's that? Is that a smiley face? Is that a smiley face? I've done this experiment about 50 times. I draw this on a board and I ask people what it is, and about 50% of the time, now out of 1,000 people maybe, they see that as a face. Is that a face? Is that a face? Okay? Our brains love patterns. Patterns, we see these patterns and they aren't even there. That is not a face. That is a potato. That is some vinegar and oil, I guess. That is just a random few marks, okay? This is something we have to be aware of and have to deal with. It's called apophenia. For a while I've been asking audiences, who here has apophenia? And nobody raises their hand. And everybody has this. It's the nature that this thing that we're going to see patterns in nonsense information, in random information. In other words, we're going to fool ourselves. Our brains are wired for this. Let's look at another thing related to this. We want to be in control. Now, the studies that are mentioned in Mlodinow's book, I also found other studies because I'm not trying to be an academic about this, but I want to have enough support to prove that my biases can be confirmed, right? That's another thing we're going to talk about in a moment. This is called the illusory pattern perception. We want to see these patterns so that we can confirm that whatever it is we believe it. Now, I like to say this, what should we control? Let's control our urge to control things. That's what we need to do, because almost everything, it's just an illusion of control. It's because of this nice saying. These 3 gentlemen here from the 1800s and 1900s, it's all attributed to all of them. It ain't so much the things we don't know that get us in trouble. It's the things we do know that just ain't so. Now, you can clearly, if you're going to be a humorist in the 1800s in the U.S., you wanted to have a glorious mustache. By the 1900s, you could be clean shaven. But I think that I tracked it back at least to this guy, Josh Billings. I honestly believe it's better to know nothing than to know what ain't so. Now, that guy's got a great mustache and a nice little beard too. Pretty slick. So, I are wrong is sort of what I'm saying. I'm always wrong. We got to be really careful. I love this guy. He goes around the world now talking about beyond budgeting. The fear of losing control is a big barrier to change, but the control is an illusion. And still the fear is real. So how are we going to deal with this? This all has to do with our biases. And the one I mentioned a moment ago is our confirmation bias. We'd rather take the wrong information that proves we're right than get the right information that proves we're wrong. Hindsight is 20/20. That means that as we look back over something, we can always figure out why we did so well. if we did well, or excuses as to why we didn't, but when we're in the middle of it, we had no idea. Ben Franklin puts it this way: it's a wonderful thing, or a convenient thing, to be a reasonable creature. I love this, since it enables one to make or find a reason for everything you have a mind to do. We'll make it up. We can convince ourselves of almost anything. And so why should we care? Well, it gets worse. If you hire a CEO, according to Kahneman's book, if you hire a CEO because they were really great somewhere else, the chances of them succeeding for you is no better, even if you did a good job in making your decision, than a flip of a coin. A flip of a coin. A flip of a coin. Why don't we just flip coins and let's forget about all this decision making we go through? Should we hire you? Yes. Should we hire you? No. Should we hire you? It's really make-believe. All the decision making we do is just to make us feel like we're in control. Okay. I'm going to keep my eye on this clock, so if I run out of time, I will play the last couple slides and you will never know the difference. So Daniel says there's a lot of randomness in these decisions people make. Let's just accept it, that we have this randomness. Let's accept it. What are we going to do about this? And just for a start, you can read those books. I read those books, both of them, at least 3 times. Kahneman's is huge, but when you're flying around the world, you get 8 hours solid to read a book. You can get through just about anything. I read every 3rd word, get through it just like that. That was a joke. I'm just kidding. So what are we going to do about it? Well, actually, this gets to be kind of dark after a while. It becomes kind of dark that if this is how we're living and everything blots out, I don't want this much, I would say, depressing stuff to talk about. So let's lighten it up a little bit. I want to talk about serendipity. That's about randomness as well. So serendipity, to be defined this way, it's the good things that happen that we weren't expecting to happen. What if we could discover wonderful? And that's what I think software development's about, but I'm not talking so much about software development right now. What I'm talking about is in the way we live our lives and the way we do our work and our business. How are we in the workplace? What if we could increase the possibility of serendipity? How could we increase it? What if we could at least better see it when it comes? What if we could get good at that? That means we got to pay attention. Like my dad would say, good things come to those who pay attention. He kind of knew that over time. It took me many years to learn that. Okay, well, what if we are willing to embrace it when it comes? This is kind of the way I wanted to operate. By the time I got to Hunter, where we originated this mob programming stuff, I didn't want to work at a place anymore where I had to convince people all the time that we could do things better. Let's find a better way. I wanted to work at a place where they already were ready for that. Matter of fact, I think of the interview nowadays that was my last job that I interviewed for. Since then, I've more or less been out. Well, I guess I had one other interim one, just out talking, and so there's no real interview to do. But for a while, I'd kind of learned when I'm in an interview, it's not them interviewing me, it's me interviewing them. Do they have their act together enough that I'd like to work here? And so I want to embrace this serendipity, and this requires that we be open-minded, because most of the stuff that's going to come to us is going to be stuff we're not really aware of yet. We have to be ready for it. I like this picture of the cat. It has really nothing to do with the words there. What if we could lessen the chance of fooling ourselves? You know, when I was younger, I would say, oh, that's too crazy to work about stuff. I say, oh, that's too crazy. That's not going to work. And then somewhere in my 40s, I started realizing I was often proven wrong when I would say that. And so what am I going to do about it? I started saying, well, that's pretty crazy, but let's give it a try. Let's be open to this. Sometimes the pattern, I don't want to fool myself by the patterns that I'm used to, the stuff that makes me say that's too crazy to work. I love this guy. I got this slide, part of it from Dave Farley, who's probably spoken here at Øredev in the past. This is Richard Feynman. The first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool because you trick yourself. Don't fool ourselves. So I'm talking about me more than anything else. So serendipity, let's just do it. But there's no way to just do it. So, yeah. So I don't know how to do that, but I'm going to share a few things as we go. And one of the things I want to talk about is this book called Obliquity. I like the subtitle, Why Our Goals Are Best Achieved Indirectly. I read that book. He's a writer, I don't know, for Financial Times or something. Does anybody know? John Kay. Good book. I enjoyed it. But I believe that most of our goals are the wrong goals. Goals should be about setting us on a course or on a direction, but we should be open to changing our minds. A goal is a direction, not a destination. So that was part of what was happening there with the mob programming. I didn't know we were going to end up on everybody working together on a team in one spot. I keep getting notices that people are tweeting, so I hope some of that is you guys. Thank you. I keep this on because it encourages me, and the more I hear it, the better I feel about my talk. You don't want to go too dark today, right? So you get the idea. So this came to me, what it is. Somebody once asked me, this was very embarrassing in an interview. And the person said, as an agile thought leader, blah, blah, blah. And I thought, wait, stop right there. I'm not an agile thought leader. I'm an agile thought stumbler. I just stumble around, and when I stumble on something that seems good, I don't mind sharing it. But I'm not a thought leader. I don't even really know what that means. And that got me thinking, actually, the beginning or the first version of this talk, I think I called purposeful stumbling or something like that. You'll see a little bit of that in a moment. So I think of this as stumbling in the right direction. The trick is knowing the right direction, and the sad news is I can't know the right direction. I don't think that there's a way to know it. But we can learn to steer, so let's learn to steer. That's sort of what most of my time's been spent during the last 15 or so years. Once I realized in our industry, we keep doing the same things over and over again, and they don't work. A lot of you are tweeting again now. I really appreciate that. Let's keep up the tweeting. So it really annoyed me to go to work at a place, and things were just like they were at the last place I left before I got there. In the early 2000s, you get a contract to work at a place, and then when that contract's up, you go to another place. All you had to do is spell VB, and you could get a job. Nobody here knows what VB is anymore, right? Or all you need to do is know how to spell C++, and you can get a job. So nowadays, it's sort of that way again, but back in those days, it was easy to go from job to job if you wanted to. And if one place was bad, you could always try another place. But going from place to place, we were starting over and over again. So I wanted something better. So first of all, turn up the good for me is energizing. It helps me understand the good in my life. It brings rapid results. Constant success is something that really keeps our spirits up. Another important thing is it has more impact than working on the problems. An interesting thing that I found was when we turn up the good, a lot of our problems fade away. Now, I won't go into this in this talk. I cover it in another talk. But what we found was most of the things that were hampering software development teams that I'd seen in the past, we were no longer having affect us when we start working well together as a team through mob programming, but even a little bit before that, because we started working well together in other ways. Now, I got Kent Beck in here again because I put him at the front because I want to make sure if I didn't get this far, I wouldn't cover it again. So you can just ignore. There's Kent Beck. He wrote some books. Okay. So this is my first hard stop. How are we doing for time? We have another how many minutes? 5 minutes? Pretty good. So this would be the time I'd answer questions, but I don't think this is a talk that we should be answering questions in. You can talk to me afterwards. I'll be hanging around if you want to, just to make me feel good. I appreciate that. So stumbling purposely and purposeful stumbling. I look at this from two different directions, and I did look up the word purposely. I'll share that in a moment. I take small steps. This is purposefully. This is stumbling purposely, so I can react and learn from each step. Then I can change my direction. And that means daily steps at the very most. Daily steps. Anything I learned today I want to act on. If you have a car, do any of you have cars here? Old-fashioned cars with gasoline engines? Because if you have an electric engine, this won't work.
You see the little red light on that tells you that the car is overheating. What do? You go, oh, geez, better look at that next month. You pull over right then and there, right? Otherwise, you're going to fry the engine and need to get a new engine or get it rebuilt. So let's pay attention moment by moment. That red light goes on, you pull over, find out, oh, there's a leak, or I forgot to put water in it in the last 18 months, or whatever it is. So this is purposely is intentionally. I'm going to stumble on purpose and see what I learn. And the way that I do this, it requires paying attention. I can then, purposeful stumbling is where I actually set out to do things that I don't know if they're going to work or not. I just think that they have some potential for exposing stuff that I want to learn about. And I'm going to perturb the system. I heard somebody talk about perturbing the system once, and I like that. It's like when in chemistry class, you put these things together and nothing happens, but when you shake it a little bit, all of a sudden there's a reaction. Let's perturb the system. It's the learning possibilities and the opening of the doors. That's what I'm after. So I stumble with purpose, and I purposely stumble. So we're paying attention and we're learning to see. We're getting really close to being done, so I had my second hard stop. So we'll just skip through those. And I want to talk about this, flipping things over. My dad used to say this all the time. If you're looking at something from one point of view, you will not see the other possibilities around you. You have to turn around and look in the other direction. And not only look in the other direction, you've got to look from someone else's point of view. So there's lots of ways to do this. It sometimes seems that we're stuck in this land. If it's a problem, if it's broken, we need to fix it. We're always looking for something to fix. And I think that that's a state of mind that might be misguiding us. We reward people for fixing problems instead of for not having problems. That's troubling to me. This is actually extremely troubling to me, and there's a great paper written on it called Nobody Ever Gets Credit for Solving Problems That Didn't Happen by a couple professors at MIT. Did I mention them already? It's a pretty good paper worth reading, and they basically are saying we should spend most of our time improving our capabilities instead of doing the work that we're setting out to do. And that's what I was attempting to do at Hunter. We would spend 8 hours a week studying together, learning to be better programmers. So I think that we've come probably far enough to actually do a hard stop, because I got like 10 more of these. How long do we want to go? I got a lot more flipping overs here. Should we go on a little bit longer? We'll go a few more moments. Okay, so there was another hard stop. I use this to remind me of an exercise that I like to do. That's to allow people to notice things that they don't normally notice. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about that exercise, but I have the people in the room look around the room and count the number of circles in the room. We're not going to do it. We don't have time to do it. Usually, after a while, people start noticing things that are circles that we normally wouldn't notice. And a good example is this chair has about 5 or 6 I can see right off the bat. Each of the legs has circles at the bottom. There's a circle here, there's a circle here, there's a circle at the top. Each of our eyes has circles in it. Each of those chairs probably has something like circles. There's screws and rivets, and there's thousands of circles around us. The reason that I bring that up is because until I ask you to look for circles, you don't even pay attention to the circles. Who cares? This is the same thing with turning up the good. We have to be looking for the good. We have to learn to see the good that's around us. So I just covered this in a condensed form, so let's cover it a little bit longer. Choose to look for the good. Every morning, I'm going to look for what's going well today. What's good in my workplace? What can I turn up there? We can change our perspective and look in a different direction, and we can open a different door. And we do this over and over and over. This is baby steps. So when we do these things, at the end of each day, we reflect, we tune, and we adjust. It's kind of cool. My dad used that term all the time. We take baby steps to learn. Baby steps are how we learn. It's baby steps. I think we've covered enough. I don't want to overload you, and really this is heavy, heavy stuff, right? Not at all. This is pretty simple. If you follow these things, you end up getting better and better stuff every day.
And for me, at Hunter, over a 6-month period, we went from a team that could hardly recognize when they had code that was hard to work on to a team that could easily recognize it and knew what to do about it. They knew how to manage themselves. They knew how to gather themselves together to get the work done. And we began mob programming. So that's what Turn Up the Good is about. I think this is a good spot for a real hard end. So thank you very much. I'm going to show you 5 bonus slides real quickly. When I first started learning to program, thank you for the encore. I bought some software and it was lousy software. It was like this. You open up the box of Jell-O, you blow into it, it covers your face with Jell-O, and it's a bad experience. So I just want to show that. My wife drew those. I love it. So I thought, hey, if I can buy lousy software, I can write lousy software. So I learned to write lousy software. So there you go. Thank you so very, very much.